I want to be able to control and have spontaneity and have freedom over my time, both in terms of where I spend my time, what I do, where I travel to. I hate the thought of someone being able to dictate to me where I have to be and when.
Today, we're going to be diving into the personal journey of Lewis Smith. That's right, our very own Lewis, my co-host of the podcast and the founder of Dropship Unlocked. We'll be exploring how you, Lewis, got into running online businesses and why you went on to start Dropship Unlocked. Lewis, I want to ask you all about your journey so far to inspire people to take control of their own entrepreneurial path. So, Lewis, do you feel ready to share your journey today?
Thanks, James. Yep, excited to share my experiences and the reason behind starting Dropship Unlocked. Hopefully this one will resonate with many of our listeners as well who are looking for their own breakthroughs in e-commerce.
Fantastic. Well, let's start with the foundations. No better place to start than finding out really what was the foundations for your working life, which will have been your upbringing. So how do you think your upbringing impacted your initial life decisions?
Yeah, I think growing up, I had a really happy childhood. My upbringing, I was very fortunate. I was the eldest of three children in total. So I've got a younger brother and a younger sister. And yeah, growing up, my parents had a really strong work ethic, a real strong focus on financial security. And I presume that came probably, as it often does, from their own childhoods where maybe their families didn't have that much money and therefore they had a very humble upbringing. And so they really wanted to kind of turn that around and focus on making sure we had financial stability and security as a family. So I think that work ethic was instilled into me from a very young age. My dad was an estate agent in London, started off working for another estate agency, eventually handed in his notice, much like I did later on in my journey, and then went on to set up an estate agency and grew it to multiple offices all around London and built a big chain and eventually sold it down the line. And my mum was a flight attendant as well. So, they were very physically tied to their jobs. There was no working on Zoom or working online for them. Obviously, the internet didn't even exist back then, really, and they just couldn't have worked remotely. It was that they had to be there in person. For my mum, it was days on end. She'd do a Sydney trip for 4 days, and then she'd be in New York twice a week, and then she'd be back to that. So she was constantly on the move and traveling. And then dad, like, many people did back then, and even still now, would work in London until 7, 8 in the evening. And sometimes he'd not get home until I'd gone to bed. And so I remember some of my most joyful childhood memories actually involve spending time with my parents because it was a luxury. It was like they would work hard in the week. We'd be at nursery or then eventually school. But then when my dad would take us to football training on a Sunday morning, I remember that being really special time, and he'd get roped into like refereeing the games, or they'd ask him to run the touchline, and he used to get frustrated with that standing there in the rain. But then we'd kind of have a chat in the car. I was always like covered from head to toe in mud, after all the slide tackles in football. And he just asked me how I felt the game went and give me some like tactical advice. And I just remember like really latching onto that and just idolizing my dad and his role that he played in my upbringing. And then also with my mum, some of the great times and memories with her are like her job enabled her to have staff travel as a benefit. So we used to be able to travel around the world to some like incredible destinations all over the planet, often in the business class as well, which was amazing. And it was such a fortunate thing that I had only until I was 21 years of age. And then you lose that as a family, as a child of staff. Well, that was the rule back then anyway. And so I was very lucky. And it really, I think what it did, that ability to travel the world so early, obviously back then I didn't fully appreciate it, but I think it just broadened my horizons. It showed me what was outside of my town and my country. And it showed me like the different cultures around the world of how people live. And I think those experiences just taught me the value of hard work, the importance of financial stability, and highlighted the sacrifices as well that my parents needed to make to achieve it as well. So initially that kind of set me on the path of going through school, going through university. I had a great biology teacher at school, Mr. Morgan, who inspired me in the subject of biology. And sometimes you'll have experienced this, if there's a teacher that you specifically remember just really like lighting up a subject for you at school. And for me, it was him. And that encouraged me to say, okay, well, I'm not sure what I want to do for a living, but I really like this subject. So I'm going to go and study something related to human biology. And I went on to study medical microbiology at university, which was a completely kind of random shift from where I thought I might end up. But did that and then went into the corporate world, followed that route, went on to a medical devices and diagnostics graduate training scheme, lived around the UK, worked for a huge American corporate and worked in that company for probably 8.5, 9 years, something like that. And yeah, various different roles, being in operating theatres, helping with medical devices, helping with like training doctors and nurses in procedures for using the specific devices that we had. So yeah, it was a really interesting journey, but it's not the traditional corporate path of being like a cubicle where you're speaking to your co-workers either side of you. A little bit different, but still came with its drawbacks, which we'll dive into, I'm sure, in this episode.
Absolutely. No, fascinating upbringing. No doubt your dad's work ethic showed you the value of hard work and what you can do to provide when you go out on your own as well. And also, no doubt from your mum, you saw the other side of the world and you even saw business class. I think to see that at a formative age, I guess you started to realize the impact of financial stability. There's really a bit of a key theme that was built for you. And so that went on to build the career that you've got now. But of course, it sounds like the start of your career has got nothing to do with the current situation that you're in at the moment. So I'm interested to dive into that. Why do you think you went into the corporate world and then you were seeking something different? Why did you look for an escape from that initial corporate life?
Yeah, well, you're right on that first point about being able to travel in such style as well. It was funny. Sometimes it was business class. Other times it was jump seats. So like I've had trips where I've traveled to Rio in Brazil or to Thailand on a fold down jump seat with the 4-point harness or the 3-point harness that you wear on one of those staff jump seats, and that is incredibly uncomfortable. And you're sitting there like basically in a coat cupboard with no window for like 12 hours or something ridiculous. So it's funny, it can go one way where you're like, oh wow, flat bed and a movie and a really nice meal, to like sitting in a coat cupboard for 12 hours. So it's a real kind of contrast. But you know, when you're young, you don't care, do you? It's exciting either way you're traveling. But you're so right, like seeing the people who were in business class paying for that fare it changed my perspective on money, and it made me think I could do this one day. Like what do these people do for a living? I wonder what businesses they own. What do they do? And it kind of, that proximity to wealth, I think, really expanded my belief in what would be possible one day. So this is probably happening on a subliminal level the whole time, but I do think it really expands your horizon. So yeah, to answer your question, what was it about the corporate world that made me want to seek something different? I think the big thing that I've learned about myself in recent years is my desire for more freedom and autonomy. So one of my huge values is desire for autonomy. I want to be able to control and have spontaneity and have freedom over my time, both in terms of where I spend my time, what I do, where I travel to. I hate the thought of someone being able to dictate to me where I have to be and when. I don't know what it is, but something about that just grates against every fiber in my being, and I rebel against it. And it's probably just the deep-rooted entrepreneurial spirit in me from my parents.